The non-political animal has no parents and no children, requires neither warmth nor coolness, needs no education or training, seeks neither occupation nor respite, doesn't relax or work, and when the non-political animal dies, he will bury himself.
Words of Lord Neil Kinnock there, former Cardiff University Students' Union President and leader of the opposition from 1983 in an interview with us last summer. Words that really struck a chord with us here. Noswaith, good evening. My name is Elliot Howells and I'm your Students' Union President. It's really incredible to see so many of you here this evening, engaging as what have been described as the most unpredictable general election in recent memory. As a generation of young people and a body of students, we're continuously accused of being apathetic and disengaged when it comes to party politics. I was at NUS's national conference last week, where TV presenter and political writer Rick Edwards said, "The idea that young people don't care is frankly offensive." And I absolutely agree. 600 of you registered for this event in a matter of hours. I heard of students setting alarms to wake up and get their tickets. That doesn't really sound apathetic to me. But this evening isn't about what I have to say. It's about what the 7 party representatives backstage have to say about what they believe in. Questions were submitted in advance of this evening and came in their droves, so thank you very much for that. For those that were similar, we've combined them to ensure that the main themes submitted were covered. As a devolved nation, issues like education, health and housing are up to the Welsh Assembly Government. So we prioritised other areas this evening and are asking the questions that are not being asked on a national stage. If you'd like to ask a question during the open discussion, please raise your hand. Wait for a microphone to be brought to you and state your name. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment through the medium of Welsh, translation will be available following your comment. For those of you on Twitter this evening, please use the hashtag #GenerationVote. Similar events like AGM have trended nationally in the past, so take that as a challenge. Now, to kick off this evening's main event, please join me in welcoming S4C and ITV presenter and political correspondent Catrin into the stage to chair our debate this evening.
Well, thanks to Elliot for that warm welcome here tonight, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. A brilliant turnout for this big debate here at Cardiff Students' Union, and diolch I chi gyd am ddod ato ni. Now, I'll just quickly run through the order of this evening's debate. Firstly, we have 7 party representatives here with us tonight. On my left here, Elliot Roberts from the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Democratiaid Rhyddfrydol Cymru. Then Sam Gould from UKIP, Pippa Bartolotti from the Wales Green Party, Plaid Cymru. Then Owen Smith from Labour, Welsh Labour, Llafur Cymru. Andrew R.T. Davies from Welsh Conservatives, Cydwadwyr Cymreig. Then Dafydd Trystan from Plaid Cymru. And Ross Saunders from the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, Clwmblaid y Sosialwyr a'r Undebwyr. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight. Diolch I chi hefyd am ddod. We'll be opening the debate tonight with a 1-minute opening statement by each representative. Then we'll move on to the questions, where the party will again be allowed to give an opening statement of 1 minute before we open the topic for debate. We have 4 questions to be debated this evening. Those topics will be on equality, representation of young people, the economy, and freedom of speech. There are roving mics, so we'll try and incorporate any questions or comments from the floor as we go as well, but put your hands up and we'll try to get to you within that time. Mae'n bosib hefyd I chi gofyn cwestiynau yn y Gymraeg, mae yna offer cyfieithu yma. There are translation equipment, so if anybody wants to ask a question in Welsh or English, we can accommodate both. So, my 1-minute opening comes to an end now, so I'll turn swiftly to the party representatives here tonight to get our 1-minute opening speech. Can we start with Welsh Labour, Owen Smith?
Thanks, Catrin, and thanks for inviting me to speak to you all this evening. It's great to see so many people here. Labour, my party, was founded to fight inequality in Britain, in Wales, and across the world a century ago, and that is still what motivates the Labour Party, what's brought me into politics, and what we are here to fight for in this election. Because a century on, the gap between rich and poor, between those who have the most and those who have the least, is still growing. Only yesterday we saw that over the last 5 years, the 1,000 wealthiest families in Britain have doubled their wealth to £550 billion, while most families have lost £1,000 each. Give Labour a chance to correct that. Give Labour a chance to implement policies that will tax the rich effectively, that will give more money to our vital public services, and will deliver once more an economy and a society that works for working people. That's our aim. Vote Labour on May the 7th if that's what you want to see.
Owen Smith, thank you very much. Now on to the Trade Union and Socialist coalition.
The recession was a test of our political parties, and it was a test that they all failed. The bankers and the billionaires who dominate our economy drove it onto the rocks and then expected us, ordinary people, to pick up the bill to pay for the damage. We're paying with cuts to our living standards and with cuts to access to public services like universities and the NHS. And we're in unprecedented, unequal times. Why is that the case? The reason is that none of the existing political parties were willing to defend us from the demands of the rich that we pay. Labour started austerity with billions of pounds cut from public services under Gordon Brown. Then they handed the baton to the Tories and the Liberal Democrats, who made it worse. But last month, Labour MPs, actually including Owen Smith, unless I'm mistaken, voted with the Tories and the Liberals for another £30 billion worth more cuts to public services, and UKIP want to go further. Unfortunately, in the councils in which they have a position, Plaid and the Greens also haven't resisted austerity, and that's why the organisation that I'm representing tonight was formed, the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition.
Ross Saunders, I'll have to bring you to an end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now on to the Welsh Liberal Democrats, if we're going to have your opening statement, please.
Okay. Well, diolch am y gwahoddiad yn y lle cyntaf. I joined the Liberal Democrats, or the Liberals as them were in university, because I felt they best represented the openness and the tolerance that I saw as a young person. I think we've actually communicated that into our dealings at Westminster. We've introduced equal marriage, we've led the fight against climate change within the Commons, created a record number of apprenticeships at Westminster level, and have also sought to defend Britain's influence and responsibilities in the world through setting the development world target. Here in Wales, of course, we've actually negotiated with Welsh Labour as far as its budget is concerned, and we've concentrated on actually improving the lot of disadvantaged pupils in our schools and in creating apprenticeships here in Wales. So we've used our influence wherever possible to actually improve the life chances of the most disadvantaged.
Aled Roberts, thank you very much. And next, Plaid Cymru, Dafydd Trystan.
Diolch yn fawr, gyfeillion. We face the most exciting and unpredictable election in many years in the United Kingdom. And in that election, you can make a difference. You can vote for the 4 shades of Westminster grey to my side here, or you can vote for a new style of politics, a changed politics, a politics of hope, a politics of investment in public services, and not more austerity and more cuts. With the exception of one cut, I'm very happy to cut Trident renewal, of course. For me, the image of this election was my leader, Leanne Wood, having a hug, or a cwtch, as we say here in Cardiff, at the end of the leaders' debate with the leaders of the Greens and the SNP. Working together, Plaid here in Wales, the Greens in England, and the SNP in Scotland, we can create a better future for our people. And in that vote that Ross mentioned, where we voted in Westminster against the cuts, it was Plaid, the SNP and the Greens that voted against when Labour and the Tories joined forces to vote in favour. It's time to shake up Westminster. It's time to stop these damaging cuts. It's time to put the people first and build a better future.
Thank you. Now can we have Pippa Bartolotti from the Wales Green Party, please?
Well, for those who have read our manifesto, they will see that the members of the Green Party voted that austerity would be a red line for us. So I just thought I'd put that right. The Greens have a bold vision for a more equal and sustainable country, and we don't apologise for it. Business As usual, politics makes us impatient with suffering, too tolerant of inequality, too prone to prejudice. Public services are stifled. Social mobility is in decline. Consumer capitalism is the problem. The solution is an economy that works for ordinary people and which operates within the finite limits of the earth. There you go. Thank you. They say that men and nations behave wisely when they have exhausted all other resources. We haven't got 3 planets. We haven't got
Bartolotti, I'm
clean
afraid
air.
you've got your applause and a few extra seconds there. Thank you very much for that opening speech there. Now on to Sam Gould with UKIP, please.
Thank you. Well, there's one thing I really want to cut, and that is tuition fees. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the fees are going on, and the fact that Labour introduced tuition fees, then they tripled them, and then of course we then got the coalition who then tripled them again. Now, UKIP want to actually pay for tuition fees on those studying science, technology, engineering and medicine and mathematics. What we'll do is actually pay for those after those people completing those degrees have paid taxes and stayed in the UK for 5 years. But I want to take that one step further. I'd actually like to see tuition fees gone altogether. And that's something which I would want to be fighting for personally. Although we've got that in our manifesto and our fully costed manifesto to actually be able to cut those on those subjects, let's take it a bit further. Why not? I think the situation that so many students, the average amount of student debt now is going to reach about £44,000 by the time many of you finish university. And what are the prospects for jobs? It's very limited. And the government is only going to get about 45% of those tuition fees back. Something needs to be addressed. We have more than one policy. We have more than 2 policies. Read our manifesto. Find out the truth. Don't be misguided by the lies of the media, what other parties might say. And find out for yourself. And do vote May the 7th.
Thank you very much. And finally, Andrew Davies from the Welsh Conservatives.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me along tonight and to participate in this hustings meeting. From the Welsh Conservatives' point of view, we want to build on the strong economy that we've built over the last 5 years while in government, making sure that we clear up Labour's mess. The note that was left for us in the Treasury was quite clear. There is no money left. So there have been some tough decisions to have been taken. But there are equally some more decisions that need to be taken so that we can continue the strong economic growth that gives people the opportunity to get jobs when they qualify and ultimately new businesses to start up and create revenue that can support our great public services, whether that's the health service, whether that's our education or our local authorities. From the Welsh Conservatives' point of view, we have brought forward exciting proposals about finance for business, about financing high street regeneration, about supporting students in their education, but above all, continuing to develop an economy that can support our pensioners, develop a work plan, and ultimately make sure that this country has a strong, sound footing in the world. And that ultimately is what the choice is on May the 7th. Building a strong United Kingdom and Wales, or going back to the devastation wreaked by many of the policies that Labour left us with in 2010. I have no doubt that on May the 7th, people will vote confidently for another 5 years of a Conservative government.
Thank you very much. Quite welcome to applaud them all. Thank you. Thank you all for setting out your stalls there in the first opening statements. Now on to the debate element of tonight's proceedings. So can we have the first question tonight? And I think it comes from Jay Greaves. Where's Jay Greaves? Oh, here. What's your question? Jay. Is the microphone on? Have we got another roving microphone we can bring to Jay here? Oh yes, I think it's on now. Yes, we can hear it. Thank you, Jay. If we can have a question, please.
How would your party work to improve the lives of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people?
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So the question was, how would your party work to improve the lives of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people? Again, we'll have 1 minute opening statement from each of you, please. We'll start with Sam Gould from UKIP.
Thank you, Jay, for that question. I think that's a fantastic question. We have an organisation within UKIP that represents lay, lesbian, bisexual individuals. and we care very much about people and want to treat them equally. We believe in equality within our party. We believe in treating people equally, no matter what their sexuality, no matter what their gender, no matter what their race. There shouldn't be tags to different people or trying to segment people in different ways or fit them to different brackets. We're all individuals. Shouldn't we all be treated the same? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then next can we have Pippa Bartolotti from the Wales Green Party to respond.
Greens would legislate to remedy inequality of pension inheritance for same-sex couples. We would apologise and pardon the more than 50,000 men convicted under the anti-gay laws. We would end detention of LGBTIQ asylum seekers. We would stop the gender pay gap widening. It's already doubled in the last 5 years. We bring out a law to publish pay data in Wales. Women are being paid £4,000 less for doing the same job as a man. We would spend £100 million on rape crisis centres. We would remove trans people from the psychiatric disorder register. The UK Parliament is the 64th in world rankings for gender representation. I think you and I together can start doing something about that.
Now can we have Alec Roberts from the Liberal Democrats, please?
Thanks. I mentioned at the beginning that one of the reasons I joined the Liberals as they then were the kind of society that I wanted to live in here in Britain. And I'm very proud that it was one of our ministers that actually made same-sex marriage legal. And that wasn't an easy task as far as actually convincing a majority within certainly the coalition was concerned. But we can go further. I think here in Wales we have a lot of work to do to actually require schools to tackle homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying. And also we want in the manifesto to actually legislate to make homophobic and transgender-phobic chanting at sports events illegal in the same way that racist chanting is currently illegal. But there's a long way to go, and none of us should underestimate the actual measures that we need to take to tackle inequality.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now on to Dafydd Trystan, please, from Plaid Cymru.
I'm proud that in Plaid Cymru, one of our most dynamic and active sections is our LGBT section, Plaid Pride. And one of the great things that Plaid Cymru has put forward is a range of measures, specific measures to tackle issues around discrimination against LGBT people. We'll toughen sentencing on homophobic, biphobic and transphobic hate crime. We'll end the 12-month ban on blood donation by gay and bisexual men. We'll ensure that all schools and local authorities record incidents of homophobic bullying and seek to eradicate it by providing support and training to teachers, building on the work we've already done in the National Assembly, and we'll work towards the implementation of a framework for primary care service for trans and intersex people and the development of a gender identity clinic in Wales. This is an issue, a whole set of issues that haven't been taken seriously enough before in Wales. We need to take action, and we need to take action now.
Ross Saunders, please, from the TUSC.
The cuts to public services and to the welfare state have had an unequal effect. I think a lot of people know how disabled people in particular have been disproportionately affected. If you have a disabled person in your house, you've lost on average twice as much income as a result of those cuts. But what's less publicised is the effect on LGBT people. Many young people who find themselves with unsympathetic parents rely on benefits in order to get out from under those difficult situations. And also, as a result of the oppression that LGBT people suffer in society, many of them also seek mental health services. Now, I've heard many good policies here today, but there'll be no solutions to any of those problems without the resources necessary to fund those services. And that's why stopping the cuts will be absolutely essential to take up the issues facing LGBT people, but also all of the other groups in inequality strands as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now the Welsh Conservatives, Andrew Davies, please.
I think you lead by example to answer the specific question. When the same-sex marriage bill was going through the Commons, one of the best tweets that I put out was highlighting how the happiest thing that's happened in my life was when I got married, and the family that I had with that marriage, and the best friend in the world that I have is my wife. And how on earth could I sit in judgment and obstruct another person in my society having the same happiness and the same contentment that I have had? And we in government, the Welsh Conservatives and the Conservatives in London, legislated and made sure that that discrimination was taken out of the system. In our manifesto, we deal with a huge array of initiatives that we want to bring forward if we are a majority government after May the 7th. And like all the parties that have spoken here, we need a tolerant society. We need a society that respects individuals for who they are and what they can give to society. And the Conservatives stand full square on the record that we presented in the last Parliament and what we seek to achieve in the next Parliament. You need to lead, and you need to lead by example. And that's on this field where the Conservatives will lead.
Lovely, thank you very much. And finally, Owen Smith from Labour.
Thanks, Catrin. Well, Labour's been in the vanguard of campaigning for LGBT rights in the last Parliament, and indeed for the last 25 years. We made very many important breakthroughs when we were in power. And the next Labour government is ambitious to be just as much in the vanguard of changing the law in favour of people, LGBT people across this country and indeed across the world. So we've appointed Michael Cashman to be the first LGBT envoy from this country, and if we win, he will be our international envoy on this issue. We've said that we're already going to strengthen the hate crime legislation the last Labour government introduced in respect of LGBT. We've said in particular that mental health services that we want to see given equal priority with physical health services need to be focused on the LGBT community. There's a huge amount of evidence that young trans and LGBT individuals suffer higher incidence of mental health illness. We need to deal with that, and crucially we need to implement, as Pippa said, Turing's law in respect of the pardon for men who were criminalised for being homosexual in the past. All of those things would once more put Labour in the forefront of fighting for LGBT rights, as we always have done and as we always will do.
Thank you very much, Owen Smith. Right, we'll open this topic up to debate now. So if there are any comments from the floor, please put your hands up. I see some in the back already. I just want to come back on a few points raised there, and a few of them were levelled at the coalition government. Andrew Davies, I'll let you pick up on what Ross mentioned from the TUSC, that cuts to LGBT support services, austerity cuts, have affected LGBT support services more than others, disproportionately so. How do you respond to that?
No, I don't accept that at all. If you look at the record, if you look at the empowerment that we've made to the LGBT community, and in particular on all equality rights, this government has been very progressive. The pay gap has narrowed under this government, and if you look at the opportunity for disabled workers to get into employment, 160,000 disabled workers have got into employment. It's still not enough. There needs to be more. But ultimately, I go back to the point. It's easy for the parties of the left to talk about the cuts, talk about the savings that need to be made. If there's no money there, then you have to work with what you've got. And what we've done is develop an economy that's created jobs, created opportunities, and that's fed into all sectors of
Thank you very much,
communities.
Andrew. Owen Smith, you want to come back on that?
Well, first of all, to say it's not true to say that the gender pay gap has.
It has.
No, it hasn't. It's increased over the last 5 years, and only Labour is saying what we've got to do is legislate in order to force companies to reveal it. No, that's not true.
Andrew Davies, let Owen Smith.
And the other thing is, you know, those of us who've sat in Parliament opposite your party over the last 5 years know that you've been dragged kicking and screaming for this agenda, and I'm pleased that you've got there at last, but it is not something that is in the heart of the Tory party as it is in mine.
A quick response.
I think to make that accusation of being dragged kicking and screaming, the Prime Minister put his leadership on the line on this particular issue, and he made this happen, and that's what I said in my opening remarks. It's about leadership and making it happen.
Thank you, Andrew Davies. Pippa Bartolotti from the Green Party. Pippa Bartolotti, do you want to come back here?
Yes, I did, because Andrew said there's no money there. He's wrong. There is money there. Look at the tax loopholes that need closing. Look how much we can get from them. It's an estimated 90 billion over the course of a parliament. Look at a Robin Hood tax, a tax of 0.1% on financial transactions. That would raise 67 billion. There are plenty of places to find money if you have a political will.
Okay, thank you very much, Pippa. David Trystan, do you want to come back?
And that is the key point of this election. Labour and Tories alike want to continue cutting public services. Plaid, the Greens and our friends in the SNP want to oppose that and want to invest in our public services rather than cutting them. And whether it's for LGBT services, whether it's in local authority cuts, that is what we're going to face if we re-elect parties committed to austerity.
Okay, I want to keep this on the LGBT issue. Any hands? I saw a few hands up in the audience. There's one in the back there. Can we get a microphone to the back? We got. I can't see you there, so if you could tell us your name and what your comment or question is.
My name's Sonia, and this is about inequality with immigration. This is a question for everyone else bar UKIP. Are you guys embarrassed? Wait. Are you guys embarrassed that your immigration policy is more discriminatory than UKIP's?
A question. Okay, we'll take one more because I saw a hand up in the back there, but we will come to yours. Immigration policy there. There was a gentleman in the white t-shirt in the back there, just to your left. Or have you spotted another one there? Oh, right. Okay, what's your name, please?
Hi, Dylan, dyn nhw fi, ac o'n i jyst yn wondro be di lleisio pawb ar y blaen, wneud yr iaith yn fwy cyfartalyd, gan bod ni sôn o'n cyfartalyd.
Cyfartalyd ar ran yr iaith yn ogystal â cyfartalyd yn gyda'n. Okay.
So my name is Dylan, and I was wondering what the parties would do in terms of equality for the Welsh language.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Two very good questions there. Diolch yn fawr iawn am y cwestiynau fyna. Right, now welcome to you first then on the immigration question. Strongly worded question there by Sonia, I think, in the back. We'll start on my left here then, Aled Roberts.
I think one of the most disappointing sessions I had was one on Friday when I actually came across for the first time probably in this campaign, to be honest with you, blind prejudice that's, I think, being sort of whipped up by certain political parties, not too far away from me, and the Daily Mail. Because somebody actually answered the door to me on Friday and said, why should actually people be landing at Manchester Airport, be given the keys to a car, and also being given accommodation in Wrexham? Now that's the kind of rumour mill that we're in danger of actually succumbing to in this country. It's something that I remember when we had race riots in Wrexham in 2003. We certainly as a party believe that we need exit controls. It's something that we need to debate as a society, but I think that we're in danger of actually sort of succumbing to some of the demands of people who are probably disconcerted as far as change within our society is concerned. But you know, we really do need to meet this head on, and we need to say that if that's the type of society that we're going to be creating in this country, it's certainly not a type of society that I want to live in. And
kind of quick comment, we'll have to go through you, a quick comment on Dylan's question about the Welsh language. Cydraddoldeb yr iaith Gymraeg? Well, certainly, dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid I ni gael cydraddoldeb. Dyn ni wedi deud bod angen hynny. Mae'r gyfundrefn wedi gwella yn ystod y blynyddoedd diwetha, ond yn sicr nes I ddod y lawr ar y bus heno yma. Mae'n arwydd dros gorsaf Hale Frenhines sydd yn deud Cardiff Queen Street, ddim arwydd o'r Gymraeg. Ac eto pam dyn ni yma heno a dim offer cyfieithu. Mae'n offer, ond ddim ar y pryd. A felly dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid cael sefyllfa gwbl gyfartal i'r iaith Gymraeg. Lovely, diolch yn fawr iawn, Aled. So equality was the general message. Sam, I will let you respond because immigration is obviously a topic of yours. I thought you were going to give me another 30 seconds to say the same thing in English.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Would you like translation for that? Yeah, okay. Can we gofio hwnna? Will you remember all that translated?
I think Aled and I discussed in advance that he would rather say the words himself.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah,
I think there have been positive steps taken over the last few years, but we certainly, as Liberal Democrats, believe that we need to create a society in Wales where Welsh and English have parity. And certainly that is not the case. I was saying that I was driving on the bus here this evening. There are brand new signs being put up at Queen Street Station, which are in English only. You know, we have difficulties perhaps tonight because of the size of the audience. We're not in a situation, regardless of what the Welsh Government tells us, where Welsh currently has parity with English in our own country.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Sam, where do you stand on the two issues that have been raised, immigration, discriminatory policies and equality for the Welsh language?
Thank you. Well, Sonia, if I heard your question correctly, you asked the question as to why the other parties had policies on immigration which was more discriminatory than you...
Okay.
A Polish nurse and a West Indian nurse who are equally qualified can't, like the West Indian nurse is at a disadvantage. She doesn't have equal opportunities because she's not a part of the EU. How is that fair? You didn't even answer my question. You went on.
I didn't hear it, I'm afraid.
Well,
okay,
I think,
have to ask Sam to...
So basically, Sonia's completely right. The immigration policy in the UK is unfair. It's unbalanced. It allows those from Europe to come in with no checks, no restrictions whatsoever. And Europe is made of predominantly white Europeans. So technically, the UK immigration policy, in my view, is a racist one. Now, what UKIP wants is a policy which is fair, which actually makes it fair no matter what country you come from, no matter what race you come from, everyone has the same equal opportunity. Now, the reason for that is that, of course, those people, as quite like Sonia mentioned there, is that if you're from the Middle East, you're from Asia, you're from Africa, you have these atrocious loopholes to have to come through if you're qualified as a nurse, as Sonia has quite pointed out there, to come here and work within the United Kingdom, where you could be an unskilled individual from elsewhere in Europe, and you have an easy way to get in. That is unfair. It needs to be the same. It needs to be fair.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Pippa Bartolotti.
Well, let's get this straight. Immigration is a good thing. And so is emigration, for that matter. I'd like to think of all you young people doing some learning here, going off around the world, exploring other cultures, exploring the diversity that's before us, and then I would rather like you to come back again with all that wealth of knowledge. But no, immigration is good. The free flow of goods and services around Europe is one of the founding parts of the whole European enterprise. And that free flow enables us all to understand each other better. If you know your history, we know we spent the best part of 1,000 years...
Okay, I've got to cut you off because we don't want a history lesson now, but thank you very much, Pippa Bartolotti.
This was an important point.
Very quickly then, please, Pippa Bartolotti.
We spent a lot of time bombing the hell out of each other. One of the things that has come out of European immigration is a greater understanding between nations and between people.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Owen Smith.
Wales is a country built on immigration. That's the nature of our country, and we've got to recognise the fact that immigration has been a huge positive in this country, historically and presently. We are still enjoying the fruits of immigrants coming to this country to help us run public services, especially in our NHS. We wouldn't have an NHS able to deal with the scale of issues we face presently in Britain if we didn't have immigrant nurses and doctors. And so we must remember that and celebrate that. And there is a danger that the debate has become, I think, pretty ugly over the last few years, and we need to be very mindful of not inciting further racial conflict in this country, as I fear some are seeking to do for the purpose of winning votes in this country. But equally, there is nothing progressive about allowing immigration to see migrant workers or indigenous workers exploited in this country, as is happening, which is why Labour is proposing to outlaw some of the discriminatory practices that are occurring and are exploiting migrant workers. And I think that's something we should be celebrating and defending.
Thank you very much. Andrew Davies.
Immigration and emigration are good. Ultimately, the movement of people around actually enrich our society. I'm a bit perplexed by the UKIP position, obviously, because I think Nigel Farage last week was talking about how he preferred Australians and Indians, but he wasn't so fussed on others coming. So it's not an embracing situation at all, it's not. Where we have a problem, and we have to reflect on this, I think Ed Miliband has identified this, in that there was uncontrolled immigration in the early parts of the 2000s, where 3.5 million, depending on what figure you want to think of, came to these shores. Now, it's incumbent on any government to make sure that we can be welcoming, We can harness the talents of people who wish to come to our shores, but ultimately we have to make sure that we can protect the services and communities that make up this great country of ours.
Okay.
We all, if we look back, are immigrants at one point in our lives. We shouldn't turn our face against that.
Thank you, Andrew Davies. Trystan.
Okay, I'll make two points about immigration before moving on to the Welsh language question and follow Aled's example there. Immigration, Cardiff is a city of immigrants. In 1801, there were 3,000 people living in Cardiff. Within 100 years, it was one of the most successful ports in the world based on worldwide immigration. That was a dynamic city. We should be proud of it. That is what created the city we live in today. And therefore, we need to oppose the kind of racist undertones of the UKIP position, but also where the Labour and Conservative position tries to scaremonger about immigration. Let me turn, na I droi at y Gymraeg nawr. Mae'r Gymraeg, mae defnyddio'r Gymraeg yn hawl I bawb yng Nghymru, a dwi'n hynod falch, mae Plaid Cymru mewn llywodraeth nath greu y sefyllfa lle oedd y Gymraeg a'r Saesneg yn gyfartal. Mae rhaid cael hawliau i'r Gymraeg wedi gwreiddio. Mae rhaid i'r Comisiynydd gwneud ei job a sicrhau bod gan siaradwyr Cymraeg hawliau. Ond mae rhaid dechrau wrth ein traed. Yma ym Mhrifysgol Caerdydd, yn yr Undeb, yn y Brifysgol, yn ein bywydau bob dydd, newid pethau gwell i'r Gymraeg. In English, across the world there are thousands of languages. In this small corner of the world, we have the Welsh language. And I think it is incumbent upon us, from wherever we've come, whatever languages we speak, to do our bit to promote and support the Welsh language here in Wales. I'm proud that Plaid Cymru and government legislated to make Welsh and English official languages in Wales. We need to do more. We need to support equal rights for Welsh speakers and English speakers alike. I can't understand why Welsh language issues are treated somewhat differently from other equality issues. It, for me, is part of the same cloth. And finally, we need to start at our feet here in Cardiff Students' Union and here in Cardiff University.
Okay, Ross, finally, if you can tell us on the 2 points, please.
The immigration debate, it's a toxic debate that's been whipped up by right-wing forces. Why? In order to distract us from the people who really caused this crisis. It wasn't the Indian doctor who saved my mother's life a couple of weeks ago who was responsible for the banking crisis that has wrecked living standards and many of the lives in this country. And it wasn't the international students as well who have overwhelmingly been targeted by the immigration controls the last government introduced. But one thing I would say is that wherever you come from, and I believe in the right of workers to travel to find work, but wherever you find work, you should get a decent wage. And we're in favour of a £10 an hour minimum wage for all workers, wherever they come from and whatever age they are as well. And that would stop these unscrupulous employers, like Nathan Gill, actually, the Welsh leader of UKIP, who was quite willing, despite the rhetoric he supports, to house Filipino and Portuguese
Ross, if you're going to make
workers
accusations, I've got to come back to Sam just to get a response on that, and then we're going to close. Okay, Sam, if you want to come back on that, you're welcome to, but make it quick, because we're going to move on.
Well, I think one of the things is that I don't think that all of the panellists here have actually properly answered the question. I mean, some of them talked about worldwide
If you want to
immigration.
respond specifically to Nathan Gill, because it was...
Well, I'm not Nathan Gill, but I know that Nathan Gill has employed people from outside the European Union, and the fact is, you know, he also has an immigrant wife. So we're not a party. We're not a party that's opposed to immigration.
There we go then.
I've got a wife from the next village.
Well, you know.
Thank you, Elliot.
But the fact is, you've asked me something about Nathan Gill, and Nathan Gill is a terrific example. I mean, the fact is that we are a party that supports people no matter where they come from, and the question was clearly asked as to why, you know, what we'll do to make sure things are fair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll close it there.
Is there an opportunity to answer the Welsh language question? Because
you can, yes. If you want to come in, yes, no, that's fine. If you want to come in back on that quickly,
I just want to make the point that, obviously, from the Welsh Conservatives' point of view, we had a very strong record on this. S4C was brought forward by the Conservative government. The first Welsh Language Act was brought forward by the Welsh Conservative Conservatives, and ultimately we have support the measures within the Assembly to make sure the legislation that was brought forward makes English and Welsh two official languages. But the key thing to the Welsh language and the way we will make it grow is making it a living language that is relevant and people wishing to speak it both socially and in business, rather than playing platitudes to it. And ultimately, I do think that there's too many platitudes paid to the Welsh language rather than real measures that will make it a living language that will survive.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to respond to the Welsh language? Very quickly, because you three have another chance.
I agree with that, surprisingly, but what are the real measures which need to be introduced? We need to take care of the Welsh-speaking heartland. There needs to be jobs and there needs to be homes in rural Wales, which at the moment are completely underrepresented in terms of services. We're in favour of a massive council house building programme, paid for by a windfall tax on the £850 billion that big business is sitting on and refusing to invest. And we're in favour of a jobs creation programme as well, as part of that, the construction of those houses.
Okay, brilliant.
And so on.
Thank you very much. Owen Smith, Pippa, Bartolotti, do you want to come back quickly on the Welsh language?
Well, only to say, obviously, Welsh Labour will continue, as it has done over the last generation, to support the strength of the Welsh language. It's one of the great pleasures of my life that we have moved from a period in which the Welsh language was a contentious issue in politics to one where there is widespread agreement about support for it. But I would also agree that we do need to see our economy rebalanced so those parts of Wales where the language is strongest continue to be able to support people who speak the language as their first language.
Lovely, thank you, Owen Smith. And Pippa Bartolotti to close on this point.
Greens support the Welsh language with a gusto. One thing that's going to keep the Welsh language alive and well and thriving is strong local communities. We need our communities to be self-sufficient. We need them to be sustainable. We need our local communities having the right to create their own energy, to get involved in the rural activities of farming. We need to make sure that the Welsh Government legislates to be sure that our hospitals and our schools are fed from the produce of our own farms. We need to keep Wales alive and thriving, and the most essential part of the language is the community.
Lovely.
We would strengthen them.
Thank you very much, Bartolotti. And to close, Sam, where does UKIP stand on the Welsh language?
We support the Welsh language. We want all official documents to be translated into Welsh.
All
Gaelic.
official documents.
All official documents where appropriate. So obviously in England,
where appropriate is
where appropriate.
The
so we support.
Your own manifesto might be a start.
Well, our manifesto is
election
Welsh.
leaflet.
You can respond
You can get
to
that
that,
online.
Yeah, that is a point.
You can find our manifesto in Welsh online.
Can you?
Yes, you can.
I can't let that go, Sam, because we've had a look online. And we
Okay,
can't find it.
that's fine. Well, it depends which website you look on. Look on that.
It's a secret website.
No, you need to go onto the Welsh website of our party. As I said, where it is needed. So if you go into our Scottish website, you're not going to find it, are you?
A challenge for everybody after the event. Thank you very much. Right, okay, we have to go on to the next question now. And we're going to be discussing representation of young people. And Alex Coutier, I think, has the question for us. What's your question, Alex?
Returning to the point made at the start about apathetic teenagers, we're constantly reminded that we're going to inherit the future, so problems with the NHS, ballooning national debt, etc. So why do we feel so underrepresented amongst this hard-working family rhetoric this election?
And you feel, as an individual young person, you feel underrepresented by the rhetoric of the election?
But they're the only people who are voting or are part of the UK.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. Right, we'll start with the opening statements then, please. We'll go to the Wales Green Party, Bartolotti, to start off.
Right, well, you know, you're not going to inherit anything. You can make it. You can make it happen. You have the power, you have the vote. You can stand forward. We have many young people standing in the Wales Green Party for Parliament this year, first-timers, learning as they go. It's your future. You must form it. Don't wait for people like me who come into politics late. I mean, we're voting now on the direction the country's going to take for maybe the next 15 years. That's your future. You must be part of forming it. It's essential. And Greens would even lower the age of voting to 16. We've long had that policy, actually, because I go into schools and colleges all over Wales, and the young people have really got their heads screwed on. But they lack the confidence to make decisions about voting. And one of the problems with that is the withdrawal of youth funding. What happened to our youth clubs? What happened to our youth councils? We need to reinstate them and give young people a strong
Thank you very
voice.
much, Pippa Bartolotti. Thank you. Plaid Cymru, Dafydd Trystan, Plaid Cymru, please.
There is one part of the United Kingdom where young people are not disengaged by the political process. And I think that's a challenge for every one of us on the panel, and that is Scotland, of course, where there were votes at 16, where if you look at what's happened after the referendum, thousands of young people have joined political parties. Well, they've joined one political party mostly in Scotland, the SNP. But there has been a festival of democracy because young people believe, and they still believe, they can make a difference. And that's what people need to believe in. If you do that, get out there, campaign for better wages, better jobs, free tuition, free education, a decent healthcare system, the whole set, decent housing, whole set of issues that young people believe in. Get out there, get involved in politics, whichever party it is, young people can really make a difference on May the 7th.
Lovely, diolch. Thank you very much, Dafydd Trystan. Right, can I ask UKIP, Sam Gould, please?
Thank you. Well, I think there's some important points which have been raised. I think one needs to be concerned, what many of us are concerned about, is the fact that interest payments on our national debt loan will currently cost around £46 billion a year. That's more than £700 for every man, woman and child, or baby, who are growing up now, so the next generation in the country. And that's more than what we're spending on defence. I think there is a need for political reform, because I don't think many young people are actually committed to voting because they think they're not going to make that difference on the first past the post system. It's not necessarily fair, and I think that needs certainly to be addressed, and we do need political reform in the way that our voting system works.
Okay, thank you very much. And Owen Smith from Welsh Labour, please.
Well, I think young people feel underrepresented because they have been underrepresented for far too long. I think it is something we all on this panel ought to feel worried about, that young people have felt so alienated and disenfranchised over the last few years. I think it's beginning to change, however. I think it's beginning to change in the volume of people who are now engaged. In the Labour Party, there are certainly more young activists. I was out in Barry at the weekend with 50, 60 young Labour activists who come from around Wales, and I think that's true probably of all of the parties presently, and I think it's true of the manifestos. If you look at Labour's manifesto, concentration on jobs guarantee for young people, on apprenticeships, crucially of course our pledge to cut tuition fees from £9,000 to £6,000, paid for by changing the tax relief that the richest people can get on their pensions, keeping tuition fees at £3,600 here in Wales, and also our pledge to reduce the voting age to 16. All of these measures will, I think, re-engage young people, but ultimately Pippa is right. It's up to you. It's up to young people to actually get up and engage in politics. It is not for the politicians to tell you how to do it.
Thank you very much, Elliot. Elliot Roberts, Welsh Liberal Democrats. Can we have your statement?
As an Assembly member, you get to go around schools within your regional constituency, and I think young people are just as engaged in politics as they ever were in political issues. What they're not engaged with is with the current political system, and I do think you have a point. We've campaigned as a party since the 1980s for the voting age to be reduced to 16. But clearly, if we're actually having more and more young people who are not used to voting when they're 18, there is a real danger that they become disengaged and actually get out of the practice of voting. And that means that there is a danger, therefore, that political parties will actually reach out to those elements of society where the voting ratios are higher. But I also think here in Wales we made a mistake. We've got a mistake that we don't have political education within our curriculum, different to England. And I have to say as well, as far as Owen's concerned, the Welsh Government decided this year that they were actually going to scrap the Youth Parliament in Wales, which means that we're the only country in Europe currently that doesn't have a representative body to hold its politicians to account at a national level.
Roberts, thank you very much. And Gerati Davies from the Welsh Conservatives.
Yeah, thank you very much. As a father of 4 kids, all in their teens now, ultimately, young people engagement really does motivate me. I'm not a career politician. I didn't go into politics until I was about 37. But unless we show that we can make a difference to young people's lives, and by people voting, then we'll continue to see the downward spiral of participation at elections. Less than 40% of young people vote in assembly elections in the 2011 election. And all the issues that are relevant to young people, health, education, the economy, all those issues are decided in the Assembly. The Westminster election, if you want to shape your futures, you need to participate in that election. But I do take Owen to task, as Elliot did. We had a wonderful organisation here in Wales and with the guys of Funky Dragon and what they did, internationally recognised, been to the United Nations, talked about youth engagement, and Welsh Labour got rid of Funky Dragon to save apparently £600,000. Ultimately, they turned their back on young people. What we've got to do is start working, talking, and actually offering the ability for young people to get involved in political parties. And I have to say, from the Conservative Futures point of view, we've never had as big a numbers as we've got at the moment.
Thank you very much, Andrew Davies. And Ross Saunders from the TUSC.
I have to say that last contribution I find very ironic. In our organisation, we support lowering the voting age to 16. But this coalition has effectively raised the voting age to 21, at least in constituencies like this one with a big student population. Because what they've done is they've thrown up extra barriers to registering to vote along the lines that Jeb Bush threw up in Florida to prevent the black vote from having an influence on the presidential elections there. And why have they done that? They've done that to try and evade the punishment that is rightly theirs as a result of tripling tuition fees. And the Tories should be worried about it, but the Liberals should be even more worried about it. And I have to say, I don't think they're going to escape that punishment. But I don't think, just one more point, I don't think that young people are alone, actually, in not feeling engaged. It's an indictment of the political parties that we have at the moment, particularly the Labour Party, that after 5 years of the most brutal austerity cuts, there isn't a flood to the official opposition. Why is that? It's because the policies that are being offered are virtually the same between all of the big parties. We need a bold change.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Owen Smith, do you want to come back, please? Funky Dragon is the Youth Parliament has been mentioned a few times.
Yeah, well, first of all, Labour is proposing extending the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds. The Tories are opposed to that. They're proposing to extend the franchise to expat voters overseas, people who've been out of this country for 15 years not paying taxes. That doesn't strike me as terribly democratic, nor the fact that there will be many people in this room, I suspect, not registered to vote because of the way in which the Tories sort of gerrymander voter registration, one of the 3 or 4 things his government did to try and disenfranchise people at this election. On Funky Dragon, again, I think the sort of yaboo nonsense we've seen today is what puts young people off.
Well, it's a fact, it's not there anymore, Funky Dragon, isn't it? Because you took the money away.
No, Funky Dragon was outbid in a fair, open and democratic process by a group called Children in Wales, who won the contract to deliver youth engagement for the National Assembly. That's the truth, and they tried to fib about it.
Not for the National Assembly, for the Welsh Government.
Andrew Davies, do you want to come back?
I think it's really important to reflect that there's an Electoral Commission recommended individual voter registration because of obviously various examples that they had of postal fraud. Well, if you want to take it up with the Electoral Commission, I don't think the Chief Executive of the Electoral Commission is a Conservative appointment. I think she was actually appointed under the previous Labour government.
Andrew Davies, can you tell us, where do you stand on votes for 16-year-olds?
Important clarification, because if you question the impartiality of the Electoral Commission, then you really are questioning the legitimacy of the ballot.
Andrew Davies, can you bring us back to the topic?
The other point is, very importantly, about young people participating at elections. It is for politicians, political parties, to engage, to offer opportunities for young people to get involved. Hence, we come to freshers' fairs, and we go into schools in my role as an Assembly member to talk to sixth forms, and ultimately, it is important that young people...
But Andrew, where do you stand on votes for 16?
Where do you stand? Sorry, Andrew Davies, where do the Tories, where do the Conservatives stand on vote for 16-year-olds? Where do I think this audience wants to know? Where do the Conservatives stand on votes for 16-year-olds?
If you take a forum away like Funky Dragon, you pull the plank
yes or no on votes for 16-year-olds,
They pulled it out.
I'll answer it. I'll answer it for him. The Welsh Conservatives are not in favour of votes at 16. Shame on them. Plaid Cymru are. And more than that, And more than that, I mean, all of this discussion about individual voter registration, etc., obscures a fundamental fact. We do not have free votes, fair votes in the UK today. If 10% of the people vote for a party, that party should receive 10% of the MPs. That would be a fair system, and we need PR now.
Bartolotti, do you want to come back on this?
If you use your vote wisely, you will be part of what will change the electoral system of the UK. If you vote for the slightly smaller parties and they get millions more votes and hardly ever more MPs, that would not be representation. We, between us, have the power at this election to change the electoral system through force of numbers.
Okay, thank you very much. Samuel, where does UKIP stand on votes for 16-year-olds?
Well, we don't have a party whip, so we can actually vote with our own conscience, and I think that means we can vote on issues which we feel passionate about. Ethan Wilkinson, the president of the newly formed UKIP Society for here in Cardiff University Students' Union, has come out being very much in favour of votes for 16+. I am also in favour as long as there's protection for 16-year-olds, that they don't then lower the age in which then they can go to adult prisons and so forth like that, because I do think they should be treated fairly, and if we can protect those sort of issues so they don't get lowered into those different brackets and 16-year-olds are treated as adults, then I would also back votes for 16s.
Okay, can I ask you, Anna Roberts, votes for 16-year-olds, Lib Dems, presumably you're in favour?
Yeah, we've been in favour since the 80s.
But would that improve democracy? You know, the low voter turnouts for 18 to 24-year-olds at the moment, would that improve things?
I think there's an issue as to I don't understand why you can get married, why you can pay tax, and why you can go into the armed forces at 16 and you're not entitled to vote. That's the first thing. But then, as all political parties, we then have a challenge that we have to give reasons for the 16-year-olds to vote in the same way that we have to give reasons for the 18-year-olds to vote. And too much of the debate currently is centred around actually... Sorry? Sorry,
Can we get a microphone over to them?
They inherit the mess.
They inherit the mess.
Yeah, well, that's why we went into coalition. We had to actually deal with the deficit. I don't sort of try and escape from that. The reality is that once the deficit is dealt with, we need to create the fairer society that we all want. That's the issue that we've got. If we actually leave the deficit so that people, generations to come, face paying that deficit, then we're kidding ourselves if we think we're all going to have nirvana tomorrow.
Okay, just to finish off, Ross, where does TUSC stand on this? Have you got a policy on this, or personally?
Sorry, I missed that.
Votes for 16-year-olds, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, we're in favour of vote for 16-year-olds. We agree. You know, we think that young people are underrepresented in politics. But I think the main problem, I have to say, is the lack of bold policies, a bold change. We're in favour of scrapping tuition fees. We think that'll cost between 12 and 15 billion pounds. That could be paid for easily if bold measures were willing to be taken. For example, renationalising the utilities, rail and mail, would save over that amount by us not having to pay out from the public purse the profits to private shareholders. That would be a much better use of that cash, throwing that money into people's profits than paying for free education, in my view.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your contributions on that topic. We'll go on to the third question now then, which is on the economy. And I think that comes from Kate Delaney. Where's Kate Delaney? Oh, in the far left corner there.
No one wants to come out of university with tuition fee debt, but that becomes a secondary issue when most students just struggle to live off their maintenance loans or grants. Having to earn a living while studying puts students under a lot of pressure. What will your party do to alleviate our financial burdens?
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So cost of living as a student, how can the parties help? What plans have the parties got to help on this? We'll start with Welsh Labour then, please, Owen Smith.
Well, the first thing we're going to do, as I said earlier, is we're going to tackle the issue of tuition fees. So Labour is proposing to reduce from 40 to 20% the tax relief that the wealthiest people, those earning over £150,000 a year, can get and use that money instead to reduce tuition fees in England from 9,000 to 6,000 and keep them at 3,600 here in Wales. That'll allow us an extra £150 million to spend on higher education in Wales. But we also need to deal with things like wages. The biggest failure of this Tory government has been to see a rise in productivity and a rise in living standards. They will tell you that the economy is fixed. The reality is wages haven't kept pace with prices. So we will increase the minimum wage from £6 to £8. We'll introduce contracts to get companies to pay a living wage of greater than that. We will freeze energy bills that will of course benefit students. We will cap rail fares. We will cap rents in private sector across the UK. All of these will have a beneficial impact, but crucially, we've got to get our economy working properly for working people once more, because that has been the abject failure of this Tory government, a failure to transform our economy.
Okay, thank you very much. Andrew Davies, do you want to pick up on that?
What we've got to have is an economy that works. I believe the economy does work. It's creating jobs at a record number, 1,000 jobs a day at the moment. Yorkshire created more jobs than France, for example. What we've done over the last 5 years is make sure that students have an opportunity to use their degrees, their quality degrees, in the workplace. Ultimately, no payments are made until you make 21,000 or more, and ultimately we are there supporting students by making sure universities are invested in, so that you have the campuses and you have the accommodation that are world-beating, and we're starting to see that in the number of international students and UK students that are going into higher education. Much was made that there would be a collapse in registration into universities. Actually, we've seen an increase in registrations to universities, and we've also seen many people who've never been to university, and I include my own family in that. I'm not someone who went to university on the free, on the back of taxpayers. Ultimately, my daughter was the first person to go to university out of our family. She graduated out of Aberystwyth, and I want to make sure that there's more examples like my daughter who have the opportunity to go to higher education.
Okay, thank you very much. And the Wales Green Party, Pippa Bartolotti.
You wouldn't have a financial burden under the Greens because we would scrap tuition fees. How can a country not afford to educate its children? You are the future. You're the lawmakers, the designers, the engineers. You are the future. You are going to make the future. For this country to be successful, we need well-trained, well-qualified, well-motivated young people to pick up the reins as soon as possible. We would have many more jobs under a Green government. We would change the way that the economy works, because a fossil fuel industry which is dying is no way to prop up the economy of this country. Wales has more than twice the amount of renewable energy it could ever use. In Denmark, 100,000 people are part of wind guilds, earning money, providing jobs, and all sorts of employment contracts in different ways.
Bartolotti, if you can sum up. Okay, thank you very much. The Welsh Liberal Democrats, then. Aled Roberts, where do you stand?
We have to remember we've got two systems here. We're talking about the Westminster election, which determines how much tuition fees are in England and for English students. We've also got the situation here in Wales. And clearly, my party is still showing the scars on its back from the decision that it took in coalition as far as those English fees are concerned, and I don't sort of shrink away from that. But if you actually look at the English figures, the reality is that the numbers of students from disadvantaged backgrounds is actually increasing, and the objective analysis is that that system is perhaps more progressive than was thought at the time. In Wales, we're going to have to take a decision going forward. It's been put back, interestingly, until after the Assembly elections, because I think everyone thinks it's such a hot potato. But my party's policy is quite clear, and these are the recommendations that we'll be making to the Diamond Review, which is going to report next year. And that's actually that we, in Wales, look at actually introducing a student living support grant rather than tuition fees, because I think, and I speak now as a father of somebody who's hoping to go to Cardiff University in September, the big pressure at the moment are the accommodation costs and the living fees rather than the actual tuition fees themselves.
Thank you very much. Sam Gould from UKIP.
Well, thank you, Kate, for that question. I find it astonishing that he's talking about tuition fees when he was when his party said they wanted to scrap them.
No, that's not the point.
But the
so
question,
how would you pay for it then?
but anyway, what we're coming on to here is the amount of debt that you go into. I mean, how many of the people here, have had in this audience, have having to work while you're at university? Now, while I was a student here at Cardiff University 7 years ago, I had to work full time to at the same time while studying. It's detrimental that you have to work while you study to get your way through university. Well, how are we going to fix it? Well, quite simply is this: we're going to scrap tuition fees for certain subjects. We then want to make it more cost effective to be at university. Also, I said the subjects were science, technology, engineering and medicine. But what we were also going to do, what we want to do as well is what I said, I'm also fighting also that so we can scrap those fees. Now, the other thing I find outstanding is the fact that there's been less money for students while you're at university in regards to grants, less money in regards to the student loan payments. While cost of bills are escalating and the cost of rent is escalating, the amount available in cash so you can actually get by is not actually increasing in line with inflation.
Your minute's up, thank you very much. And Ross from the TUSC.
I think everybody's read stuff about tuition fees, so they all want to get it out. They don't want to address the question about living costs.
I did.
I think with these questions, these immediate questions, about your own living standards, I think you should listen to what all the parties are saying and vote for the policies you support, but also the organisation that you trust to implement those policies. Because I think that Labour's, just to go to tuition fees briefly, I think that Labour's pledge to cut tuition fees could end up being a very brief cut. This is the party that in 2005 fought the election, pledging not to introduce top-up fees and then did. But on the living standards issue, look at the fine print as well. We've got to abolish zero-hour contracts in this country, but that is not what is actually in the Labour manifesto. They say they'll abolish exploitative zero-hour contracts, but when I'm finished, ask Owen if there will be zero-hour contracts in Britain under a Labour government.
Okay, and the other question is
about the £10 an hour minimum wage. The trade unions are now supporting it. We should have it, and we should have it now, not in 4 or 5 years' time, which is what the other parties are talking about doing.
Okay, thank you very much.
And on the housing issue, just very briefly, we should cap rents. It's obvious. There should be a maximum rent
Okay, thank you
to
very much.
stop exploitative landlords making money out of students.
Thank you very much, Ross. Owen Smith, do you want to come back on this? Go on then, Trystan.
Well, I haven't had an answer yet.
Sorry.
So I may be allowed to answer the question first, I think.
Sorry, missed you in the middle more.
First up, in Plaid Cymru, we believe that education is a fundamental right within our society, and therefore we believe in principle in free education, and that's why we opposed Labour introduction of fees, and we opposed the increase in fees by the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. We believe in reducing tuition fees. In order to do that in Wales, you need fair funding. At the moment, Wales is funded to a lesser degree than Scotland is. We believe that is unfair. We believe we need fair funding. Coming specifically to look at living costs, we need rent controls. Andrew isn't right. There are international examples where rent controls work. Sensible rent controls can work to reduce your rents. And finally, we need a living wage for all. Isn't it disgraceful that the minimum wage is set at a level below that which people can live on in our society?
Thank you, Trystan. We do value your contribution. Owen Smith, you wanted to come back.
Well, yeah, just to say very, very simply, absolutely the tuition fee pledge we've made at this election is there to stay. We've been very clear about that. In fact, Ed Miliband said we would like to go further, but unlike lots of the parties on this platform, we're only making pledges we've costed, we're only making pledges that we can pay for. The Lib Dems made a promise on tuition fees that they couldn't keep. They ended up trebling it. That's not a mistake we intend to make. But we will have rent controls. We announced that only this week. 3-year guarantee, 10 years, no rise above inflation for young people. And today we announced, for example, that we're also going to scrap stamp duty for prospective first-time buyers. That will also apply in Wales over the next few years. We have said very clearly that we will be banning 0 hours contract. It is Labour, Ross, that has put 0 hours contracts on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Owen Smith.
And it is Labour that will guarantee that if you work 12 weeks on a 0 hours contract, you will be legally
Thank you very much, Owen Smith. Alan Roberts, you want to come back on this?
Full-time
Thank you very much, Owen Smith. Alan Roberts.
Yeah, it's only that it's a very, very important issue for us here in Wales, and it won't be determined at this election as far as Welsh students are concerned. It will be determined in next year's election. And what we have to understand at the moment is that the whole of the tuition fee subsidy in Wales is actually paid for out of reductions in the university teaching grant. And the universities themselves are not able to put as much money into research in Wales or improving their capital estate because of that very reason. So it's a real big issue for us going forward over the next 5 years or so in Wales.
Okay, Dafydd.
Aled makes a very important point there. University in Wales are losing out on £71 million a year at the moment. That is a challenge for everyone looking towards the Diamond Review. That means that Cardiff University is getting less funding per head than Bristol or Bath. That situation can't continue, and all of the parties and civil society, students, the Students' Union in Wales, need to work on that to address it.
Okay, we're talking about universities here, but let's focus on the students themselves and the cost of living. Pippa Bartolotti?
Yes, I'd like to add to this debate that this whole business of fees is an ideological choice. Do you know what the tuition fees are in Germany? They're €200 a year. The Germans seem to manage on that. They value their young people. The whole point of the student debt is just that, to get you guys into debt and to get you used to it for all your lives, because this is how the economy works, entirely on debt. Money is created out of debt. Without debt, this country would fall apart. So please think about what other countries do. Think about where your lives are best spent. And think about changing this rotten political system that is forcing all of you into debt before you even take a step into the outside world.
Sammy, you want to come back
I just want to come back to Owen Smith on his points on zero-hour contracts. Wasn't it in 1995 that Tony Blair promised to scrap zero-hour contracts? Yeah. No. Then 13 years of Labour, it didn't happen. And then he talks about, as well, them not using zero-hour contracts, but haven't 62 Labour MPs used zero-hour contracts in the past 2 years?
Okay, well, let Owen Smith respond on that zero-hour contract.
Well, fundamentally, it's not true. 62 MPs have casual staff who work.
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is very, very clear. A zero-hours contract requires you to be available for work, doesn't give you any terms and conditions.
How many of those work for more than 12 weeks? So
that isn't the case for those members. And equally, let us be very, very clear. There weren't zero-hours contracts in anything like the numbers we've now got in this country. In 1997, there were a handful of those sorts of contracts. Now there are 1.8 million.
In 13 years, you never got rid of exclusivity. We've got rid of exclusivity. They're 2.3% of all contracts.
We're getting very technical.
The question was, what can we help?
Security under the Tories, Andrew.
That is completely.
Come back, Andrew Davies, and bring this to a close.
2.3% of contracts are zero-hour contracts across the whole economy.
You survive on
they offer an element of. Well, if I had to, I would survive on it. Both my kids who are in university work to support themselves through university.
So
work does not hurt people, but ultimately it is vital. It is vital that there is a sensible compromise between what the taxpayer can put into higher education and what the student who has their whole life ahead of them and their earning potential can contribute as well. All I've heard tonight is people throwing the figures of billions and billions of pounds around. There will be many broken promises after this election if you listen to the parties of the left. What you have with the Conservatives is ultimately a long-term economic plan that will deliver a growing economy, create the jobs that the graduates will be able to get employment while supporting graduates who first go into the workplace and ultimately are earning under 21,000.
Okay.
We have taken action on zero-hour contracts, and in 13 years, you never did nothing, Owen.
Andrew Davies, right, we've got to draw that discussion to a close. Thank you all for your contributions on that point. I'm afraid we'll have to move on to the next question here tonight, which is an issue of freedom of speech. And I believe that Nadine Dahan has the question for us this evening. What's the question?
Hi. The NUS have condemned the counter-terrorism and security bill and described the prevent strategy and channel policies as further developing a culture of suspicion and surveillance on campuses. This could also conflict with universities' duties to promote freedom of speech by making them unwilling to engage in important but controversial topics of discussion. Where do you stand on this?
Okay, thank you, Nadine. Did you...
Would you mind repeating the question?
I will repeat the question. So the NUS have condemned the counter-terrorism and security bill and described the prevent strategy and channel policies as further developing a culture of suspicion and surveillance on campuses. This could also conflict with universities' duties to promote freedom of speech by making them unwilling to engage in important but controversial topics of discussion. Where do you stand on this? A long question, I know, but an important issue to a lot of members of the NUS. So can we start with Plaid Cymru then, please? Can we have your
we support NUS's stance, and over the last 10 years, what you've seen from both Conservative and Labour governments is this increasing tendency to turn universities, schools, and other public authorities into agents of the state to keep an eye on students and others. And I think that's a very dangerous way to go. We live in a free society. We should be proud of that. And when we were looking in the university sector, and the new regulations from the UKBA, which are requiring universities to do the job of the border agency, surely that can't be right. It breeds a culture of suspicion, and it doesn't bring people together. We oppose it, and we believe there are far, far stronger methods and ways to bring people together and to combat the very real threat of terrorism.
Okay, thank you very much. Davies Trystan. Pippa Bartolotti from the Wales Green Party, please.
Well, the right to freedom of expression and the right to peaceful protest are crucial in a democracy. Information and ideas help to inform political debate, and they're essential to public accountability and transparency in government. We deplore the racialisation of this culture of suspicion. This is a very retro step to take. It takes us back to a very unpleasant past where this caused millions of deaths. We believe in an open and secure society. It's not easy to do. It's not just words. And with the advent of the internet, we do find that other people who are not democratically elected are making the rules. If you think of Twitter and Google and YouTube, they're making their own rules over freedom of speech. So we have to be mindful that the world is moving on quite quickly, and that which we might condemn today in an open democracy could become a problem for us in an organisation which is not democratic.
Thank you very much, Pippa Bartolotti. Right, on to the Welsh Conservatives then, please, and Andrew Davies.
We live in a democracy. It is vital we cherish that democracy and ultimately espouse the values that allow people to speak freely and express whatever religion, whatever colour, whatever creed they are. And this audience today obviously is a make-up of the society, the student society here in Cardiff. Ultimately, though, the government has to strike the balance as well to making sure that there are the measures in place on advice given to them by the security services, put through Parliament and voted in Parliament, that can safeguard society as a whole. And it is striking that balance, and what we have done in government is make sure that where we have been asked to put the measures in place to support our security services, we have done that through the legitimate means of going to Parliament and seeking the vote in Parliament. It is vital, though, that we do not undermine the foundations of this society, which is to allow everyone to have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and ultimately, at every 4 or 5 years, the expression to vote and determine the direction of this country. And I make no apologies for the efforts that we have done over the last 5 years to make sure this country strikes that balance.
Thank you very much. Elliot Roberts, Welsh Liberal Democrats.
There is a balance to be struck, but I'm not sure that either Labour or the Conservatives at the time have actually sort of maintained that balance. When Labour were in government, they tried to introduce ID cards. They wanted to lock people up without trial for up to 90 days, made it illegal to protest outside Parliament, and they also allowed police to permanently store somebody's DNA, even if they were subsequently proved innocent. And I have to say, it's been difficult for us, even within the Cabinet, because we had to actually veto the Snoopers Charter that you referred to, which would have allowed internet service providers to actually record all our texts, emails and websites that we visited. Now, I don't think that that's the type of free society that I actually want to live in, and I will do everything, as will my party do, to protect those rights. At the end of the day, if we actually get rid of some of these rights that we've referred to, then we've actually given in to the type of society that these terrorists want us to live in.
Lovely, thank you very much, Alan Roberts. Sam Gould from UKIP, please.
Thank you, Nadine, for your question. Reading from our manifesto here, we want to uphold freedom of speech within the law as a fundamental British value. We believe all ideas and beliefs should be open to discussion and scrutiny, and will challenge the culture of offence as it risks shutting down free speech. And so we do believe in free speech. We do believe in freedom of expression. Where we need to draw the line, though, is where people actually incite hatred to cause violence towards individuals that will actually harm them. And that's where we need to draw the line, because inciting people to hurt other people and harm other people or kill other people is wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. And Owen Smith, Welsh Labour, please.
Well, it's a great question, and I know it's something that is enormously debated right now on university campuses across the whole of Britain. I think ultimately you've got to try and take a common sense approach to this balance between security and liberty. I think the bill that you referred to actually does try to do that. There isn't a blanket ban under the bill on certain types of speakers, but it is an attempt to get universities in particular, but other institutions too, to take responsibility for assessing the nature of speakers who are coming onto university campuses, to try and determine what they are engaged in debating, and crucially to not have people coming onto campuses who are inciting racial violence or potentially seeking to draw people into terrorism. That obviously is the objective of the legislation. Crucially, Labour did implement some very important amendments to the bill, most importantly the one that also recognises in legislation the duty of universities to protect freedom of and expression of faith and beliefs within the university.
Okay.
Universities have got to make a sensible choice. We've got to strike a balance as politicians between freedom of speech and protecting our people.
Thank you very much, Owen Smith. And Ross Saunders from the TUSC.
There is a question in the audience. I don't know if you want to take that first, Chair, as long as I get to speak.
Let us get your opening statement and then we'll come back. Thank you.
We're opposed to both the counter-terrorism security bill and the prevent strategy. We think that actually these are pretty cynical attempts to try and gather more powers for the state. And they will be used not only against those who espouse the ideas that are mentioned in this legislation, they'll be used more widely. There's a social explosion coming. People will not put up with the destruction of their living standards. And already Labour's anti-terrorism so-called legislation was used against a 90-year-old anti-war veteran. It was used as well against trade unions who were taking action to try and halt the fall in living standards. And this legislation and these strategies will be used in the same way, in my view. But it's also not an effective way of deterring people from finding these kinds of organisations. The root cause of these phenomena is the despair that many young people feel. And young people have to be given a bit of hope that there could be a future better than spending your life in a terrorist organisation.
Thank you very much.
And just
Ross.
one point, because it's a good anecdote. I used to work in a school in Cardiff that has a lot of Muslim kids in it, and they knew one of the Cardiff jihadis who went out to fight recently in Syria. And they were all talking about one thing that he said. He said that jihad, as they understand it, many Muslims would understand it differently. He said it's a great cure for depression. If that doesn't light up a warning light, then I don't know what does.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to Nadine. You got your hand up there. How do you want to respond to the opening statements?
I have 2 points I'd like to raise. Firstly, according to the bill, there are a number of things that lecturers, nursery teachers, etc., would need to look out for to look for signs of radicalisation, and they are people if they feel anxious or reserved in class, having a feeling of desire for political or moral change, disagreeing with UK foreign policy, or questioning Western media reporting. I think a media student, a politics student, a disabled student would have many of those signposts or whatever you want to call them, and it's going to lead to further marginalisation of already marginalised groups. Second point is that according to research done by a number of outlets, up to 90% of people arrested under the Terrorism Act were Muslims, 1% of which were actually convicted, and so 99% of those people were wrongly arrested and detained for up to 30 days. And so this bill, like a lot of you didn't actually answer the question, only one of you or two of you did, how do you feel about the bill itself and the implications that it could have on already marginalised groups, such as religious people or disabled students with mental health issues?
Okay, thank you very much. Andrew R.T. Davies, I'll come to you. First point, how do you draw the line and what's acceptable and who's to draw that line?
Well, I think that's the whole point about the bill. Ultimately, it's putting responsibility on people, and it's asking responsible people, obviously, to work with communities such as the student communities here in universities, the length and breadth of the country, but it's striking that balance, as I said in my opening remarks. It's striking the balance between the threat that we feel or we see or is real before us today, and all this type of security legislation is taken on advice from the security services. It is put before Parliament, and ultimately the people that are elected to Parliament vote on it. As I say, I make no apology for it, but if there is refinements to be made to the bill, I am happy to receive any constituents and take those points on board. I have to say, in
Andrew
my role...
Davies, we are in a university here. Is it right to make university staff and so on agents of the state, those creating a culture of surveillance?
Of course they are. I disagree with you entirely. It is about everyone taking their part, playing their part, and taking a part of the responsibility. We are a society, we're a society of approximately 65 million people on these islands, and ultimately we have threats to that society, and it's the roles that we all take to safeguard the values that we...
I do find it really bizarre to listen to this. We heard quite rightly a number of people committing earlier on to a Turing's Law to pardon people who were gay, who were wrongly convicted in the past. What we're going down the line of is marginalising groups, targeting marginalised groups. They're going to come for one group and then another and then another, and then we will be left on our own and there will be nobody left to speak up for us. It is a sinister bill. It should be opposed, and there are very real dangers facing our society at the moment.
Owen Smith, do you want to come back on this?
Well, we've been very critical of many aspects of the bill, not least the clumsy way in which some of the guidance around it has been drafted, that the questioner read out. We've also been critical of the way in which the current government has cut funding to work with communities where there is a risk of people being radicalised into pursuing terrorism. Funding's been cut from about 17 million to 3 million, and the number of councils that are receiving that funding under the Tories went down from 93 to just 20. So we do need to invest in our communities and in better dealing with people who are at risk for all sorts of reasons. I think many of them are economic. It is absolutely true that young, black, ethnic, Asian people in this country are more likely to be unemployed, are more likely to be marginalised, are more likely to be subject to mental illness.
But you voted for more cuts, Owen.
And we do need to be investing in those communities. But we do also need to strike a balance. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask universities, in a period in which we have got people targeting student bodies and seeking to radicalise young, vulnerable people, it's not unreasonable to say to the universities, engage in trying to...
Agreement there between the Labour and Conservatives, it seems. Elliot Roberts, you want to come back on this? Where do you stand on asking universities to play their part?
I think it's a trend, because I can remember when I was leader in Wrexham, the Prevent agenda being introduced, and they were making exactly the same points for housing officers within local authorities. If you had any of these suspicions, you should report them. And I would have rather resigned as a council leader than actually ask my staff to do that type of thing. There's a thing in this country called the rule of law. If they've got evidence that these people are inciting or actually preparing acts of terrorism, etc., let's get the evidence. There are offences. Let the police charge them, and let's put them before a court of law. We don't want to create the type of society that we talked about here, where actually people are targeted through the rumour mills.
Okay. The three of you haven't spoken. UKIP, Greens, TUSC, any of you want to come back on this?
I'd like to, with Elliot, if I may.
Can I just bring Ross in, and I'll come back to you, Owen Smith?
Just that I think nobody who has heard the contribution from the floor could think that the balance has been struck correctly on this point. That what we're talking about here is criminalising dissent. And these are preparatory measures to try and stop those who want to change things fundamentally in the society from succeeding in doing so in the years ahead, when there will be a movement to change things. I think that the way to draw people away from these organisations isn't to try and harass them away from it, is to create a real opportunity for a fulfilling life of dignity. And that means solving the social problems.
Okay, thank you very much. Owen Smith, you can respond.
Well, I was, just struck by what Elliot said, because all of us should want for those people who've gone to fight in Syria or elsewhere not to have gone, because they are putting their lives at risk. They are jeopardising their futures. And if any institution or any piece of legislation can prevent those people from jeopardising their lives, then we should embrace it. We've got to get the balance right. It's absolutely fundamental. I will, go to the wall to fight for people's freedom of speech. It's an absolute fundamental tenet of my politics. But it is not unreasonable for us to also think in these extraordinarily volatile times that we face, where terrorism is a threat that we face right across the world, as to how we deal with that in places like this university.
Thank you very much for all your contributions on that and for the questions and contributions from the floor. Right, we're going to close now because we're running behind time to get your closing statements for this evening. So I'll give you each an opportunity in your turn. We'll start with Andrew R.T. Davies, the closing remarks from tonight's debate.
May the 7th is a vital opportunity to give an endorsement to a party that has generated a record number of jobs, stabilised the public finances, invested in our health service, and ultimately has a plan, a long-term economic plan, to pay down the debt. It is your future, and ultimately that future needs to be built on a secure economic platform that looks after pensioners, creates the jobs, and ultimately offers the young the opportunity to reach their potential and reach for the skies. It's all well and good spending other people's money. We can look around the globe and see what disastrous consequences that has had. France, Greece, many others have gone before us. We turn our back on the long-term economic plan at our peril. It's in your hands. I hope that you will give the endorsement to the Conservatives so that the jobs can be continued to be created, pensioners can live in dignity, and ultimately the young can reach for the stars and reach for their ambitions. And that's why I call on you to vote for Welsh Conservatives on May the 7th.
Thank you very much. And Pippa Bartolotti from the Green Party, please.
Do not teach your children to love the wild open spaces and the glory of nature. Because if you don't teach them to love it, they will not miss it when it's gone. Already 50 towns and villages across Wales will be abandoned to the rising seas. Dozens of species are going extinct every day. The climate is changing too quickly. We have to change politics fast. We haven't got 3 planets. We haven't got clean air. Our land is polluted with pesticides and waste. We are the world's 6th richest nation, and poverty should be impossible. Our manifesto is a pathway to a more equal and secure planet. We are green and we are proud. Join us.
Thank you very much. Dafydd Trystan from Plaid Cymru, please.
Let's turn May the 7th this year into a festival of democracy. On that day, you can make a difference. You can vote for the 4 Yaboo shades of Westminster grey you've seen here tonight. Or you can vote for a new style of politics focused on people, focused on creating the conditions for people to thrive. And that is what Plaid Cymru wants to do. To end the obsession with slashing services, to have more successful businesses, to have a modern NHS and people in good quality, well-paid work. We've got a vision for a post-austerity Wales and a post-austerity Britain, and we're prepared to work with others to get there. So let's shake up Westminster, let's stop these damaging cuts, and let's put the people first and build a better future on May the 7th with Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales.
And Sam Gould from UKIP, please.
It's time for change. It's time to shake up the establishment. It's time that the political establishment we're shaken up, and that you, the young people, the future of this country, are listened to, and that you are represented truly, that we have political reform, that we can have a new voting system that will actually bring proper democracy to the United Kingdom, that will give you a voice so you can be heard. It's time also that we have that referendum on the European membership. We've never had that choice. We've never had that decision. It's time for you to be able to decide on what you want. So make that choice. Vote for change. Don't vote for the two political parties, the two main political parties. Vote for something different. Vote for change and make that change on May the 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. That's somebody's stomach, or is it?
What's the thunder?
I'll move on to Elliot Roberts from the Welsh Liberal Democrats and hope that... can you all hear over the sound? Can you all hear over the sound? Yeah, okay. Elliot Roberts from the Welsh Liberal Democrats.
In 2010, we took a tough decision to go into government. It could have been a lot easier for us to actually walk away. But we realised that since then, people have had to actually face tough choices themselves. People have had to work hard and make real sacrifices to get to where we are today. But we do think that the job is being done. The economy is stronger than it was before. We've got amongst the top growing G7 economy in the world. We think that we do need to actually still tackle the budget deficit so the generations to come don't face the debt that we were actually straddled with. But the purpose of actually having a strong economy is to create that fair society, a fair society where the most vulnerable and disadvantaged actually profit from things such as the pupil premium, because it's still the case in this country that your life chances can actually be determined by the age of 5 years of age. That isn't the type of country that I want to live in the future.
Elliot Roberts, thank you very much. And Ross Saunders from the Unionist and Socialist coalition.
I think it's totally unprecedented in history, actually, that one hung parliament is going to be followed by another. And the reason that that is happening, I think, is because the understanding of millions of people is catching up to the reality, to what has changed in politics. That all of the main political parties now have been taken over by big business. You've got to be a billionaire to get a politician to take you seriously. And I think it's natural, perhaps, that in that situation, people turn first to the other old parties. But the Trade Unionist and Socialist coalition thinks that what's necessary is to build a new party that is rooted in those people at the sharp end of the austerity cuts, in the working class, in those communities, and in working class organisations like trade unions as well. That's the only way you'll get a party that is not only professing to change the situation, to take that bold change as necessary, but that will actually do it. And if you look at the record of the other parties, then that shows that that's the case.
Okay.
And a vote for Tusk will be the best way to support that strategy in the election on May the 7th.
Lovely, thank you very much. And finally, Owen Smith from Welsh Labour, please.
Thank you, Catrin. Britain is one of the richest countries in the world, and yet it is also an extraordinarily unequal country where the rich do extremely well and the rest of us don't. The last 5 years of Tory and Liberal government has seen more and more wealth and power concentrated in the hands of very few people at the top of our society. Labour's pitch at this election is Labour's pitch at every election. Give us a chance to do what we are founded to do, which is to even things up on behalf of working people. We've been very clear. If we get in, we will increase taxes on the rich. We will introduce a mansion tax. We will introduce the 50p rate for millionaires, reversing the tax cut that his party introduced. We will freeze energy bills. We will cap rents. We will make sure we invest in our NHS. We will make sure that we deliver for public services, just as Labour always does. We'll deliver for Wales too, an additional £375 million a year and new powers. If that's what you want, if you want a Britain that is a bit more equal, more diverse, fairer, more tolerant, then there's only one choice at this election, and that is to vote Labour on Thursday, May the 7th.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, all 7 of you, for your contributions tonight. I'm sure they'll be greatly appreciated. And thank you all the audience for a very lively debate. What was your question? I can't promise we'll have time to answer it because we are drawing to a close, but maybe it'll be food for thought for later.
Thank you very much. I promised this question. I was allowed it at the end of the debate. There are other candidates from constituencies other than the one indicated all across the curtains behind you there, i.e. Cardiff Central. But only one of the candidates of Cardiff Central is not represented on that stage tonight. The independent candidate. And there is not one of the policies mentioned here tonight that couldn't be fought for just as well by any independent. That candidate has pledged to serve this constituency, indicated all across the curtain behind you, for free, if elected.
Okay, thank you very much.
I
do
do
understand.
any of you on stage there
If you
know
could sum up,
your
please.
candidates well enough to be able to tell us here that they love these constituents enough to serve them for free if elected? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, that's good food for thought for us for later. And I understand there will be a chance for everybody to have a meet and greet after a networking session afterwards. So I'm sure you can put these questions to them. Thank you very much. And we do appreciate all the contributions from the audience tonight, the cheers, the applause, the heckling and the questions. So thank you for being a great audience as well.